Hello, friends. It's Amy Calandrino coming to you with another episode of the Performance Mindset Show. I'm your host, of course, Amy Calandrino, and author of the book From Perfect to Real. The show is all about leveling up in business, real estate, leadership, and life. So shifting how you think, how you grow, and how you lead. So each week I'll be bringing you real conversations with top performers and mindset experts about building big lives on your own terms. So if you're ready to ditch perfection, trust your path, and grow with intention, you are in the right space. Please be sure to subscribe. And let's go ahead and get into it. Today I have with me Adrian Quevedo, and he is owner of Healix. Is it Healix² or Healix²?
Yeah, we kind of go with Healix², even though it's supposed to be like a double helix, like the whole
double helix. Healix². Okay, duh. Okay. So I met Adrian a while ago when I had a need for some brain mapping, and we went down that whole path and had some great results. Later on, have learned a lot about what he does for entrepreneurs, for C-suites professionals, for athletes, and all the different things. And even from the brain to the gut, which we'll get into today, and how it's all tied together. So really focusing on peak performance, and which obviously ties into the podcast. So welcome today.
Thanks. I appreciate you having me, and looking forward to talking about the brain. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
It's a pretty complex thing.
I'll spend my whole life. This is 27 years that I've been studying this, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to figure it out. There's no way we'll figure it out right now. So
we are not going to all figure it out right now, but maybe you'll also give us some, different places to kind of investigate. So 27 years, how did you first land into what you've kind of been doing now, which obviously we've talked about too, has continued to grow over your career to where you feel like you could have the most impact with what you're doing. But how did you come into it, and talk to us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, so I love talking about the story because it was written in the stars, if you will. So my background's in clinical psychology. So I was at the University of Central Florida here in Orlando. Go Knights, UCF, love them. And I was in a neuropsychology class, and one of my professors was talking about different ways to look at the brain through MRI, CT, fMRI, and then he started talking about brainwaves and mentioned to us that there was a machine he had at his clinic that he could collect brainwave activity, and he used it as a neuropsychologist to look at traumatic brain injuries for car accidents, and he was an expert witness for or against, clients that were working through head injury cases, whatever they were, slip and falls and car accidents, like that. So I became interested and went to his office with a group of other students, and I saw a graduate student putting this brain mapping cap on somebody's head, and then he flipped a switch, and I saw 19 squiggly lines going across the screen, and I said, I want to know what every one of those lines means. And 27 years later, here I am still talking about those squiggly lines. And that's the brain map. So that brain map really gives us a picture of a look at, I equate it to, I use a lot of car analogies because everyone drives a car, right? So I look at it as like when your check engine light comes on, you take it to the dealership and they plug it into a computer, and then the computer tells you all the different codes and all the different parts of your car that might not be working. That's what this brain map is to the human brain. So when we put the cap on, the cap has 19 sensors. The sensors listen to brainwave activity, and then we decode and digitize it all and run it through a database system now that has over 1 million people in it. It's a large database. Yeah, it was amazingly developed by Dr. Richard Suter, who's my mentor and longtime friend and business associate and partner at one point. And really, that's kind of, how I fell into it. I became a student of Dr. Suter's. He took me under his wing and showed me everything there was about neurofeedback and brain mapping. And I've gone from, a single practitioner to a whole business behind, getting people in general, starting working with children and kids early on, working with the ADD population, autism spectrum population. And over time, it led into not just helping the kids of the household, but the parents ended up being executives and professional athletes that really needed the support themselves as well. But, help the kids first and get them situated, and then ended up moving into that space where, here now we're our goal at Healix is peak performance in executives and with athletes, and really trying to get a look at their brain as it stands from we call it a neocortical dynamic perspective of what is the brain doing. Every single part of the brain has a very specific job and task. The brain map gives us a really good look at what that is, and then we can dive into pretty much dissecting which part of the brain is contributing to the problem, and then we address it with the neurofeedback. So the brain mapping part is the first step, and then the neurofeedback is a little bit more of the hands-on brainwave biofeedback that we do to help correct any of those underlying imbalances.
So there are, and you said there's like 19 different squiggly lines, but are there aren't there like 5 or 6 main lines that are most important? So for someone that doesn't know about brain waves, like there's alpha, beta, what are like the main waves that you tend to focus on? And like, what is most concerning if one that's supposed to be more secondary is primary, and how do you kind of flip that script?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so they all equally have very specific jobs and tasks. So the 19 lines that I was referring to were 19 different areas of the brain.
19 different areas of the brain.
And that corresponds to like the frontal lobe, the temporal lobes, parietal lobes, the occipital lobes, the motor sensory area in the brain. So every single one of those 19 sensors, we look at those 4 main brainwaves you mentioned, which are delta, theta, alpha, and beta.
There's 4.
And there's variants too. There's high alpha, low alpha. There's high beta, low beta. But we talk about those 4. Every one of those, every single one has a specific balance that they're supposed to be in. So think of it as like, I tell people, it's kind of like when you used to have to tune into a radio station. And let's say here in Orlando, we're tuning into like 106.7 and we're trying to listen to that music. If you tune into like 106.5 or 106.9, you can hear the music, but it's very staticky, right? So it's not clear. The brain operates the same way, that if any of these frequencies are just out of tune in any one of those parts of the brain, then we see disorganization and we see issues start to happen. So best way to kind of go through it is one by one. So delta is the slowest frequency. That's typically, we measure it typically between 0.4 and 4 hertz. So 1 hertz is 1 cycle per second. 4 hertz is 4 cycles per second. All that is just a frequency, but then we measure the volume. How big are those waves? How tall, how powerful are they? How strong is the communication between other parts of the brain? And so delta's predominant job is an inhibitory frequency. And what that means is that it's trying to put the brakes on. And if it didn't, if the brain spends 80% of its energy putting the brakes on, if it didn't, we'd all be schizophrenic and going bonkers. So I equate it to kind of, again, car analogy, driving downhill. You want to move forward downhill, but you want to keep the brakes gently pressed so that way you're not a runaway freight train going downhill, right? So that's delta. Right. Delta puts the brakes on. A lot of people call delta the brain frequency that you experience when you're asleep, but it's really the brainwave that's the highest in amount when you're awake, because again, the brain's spending 80% of that energy putting the brakes on. So that's delta. Very slow. Now, too much brakes, the car stops, and that inhibits that car from moving forward. And not enough, then you're runaway freight train, right? So the brain really spends that time putting the brakes on. So that's delta. Theta in the car is kind of like your shifter. So whenever you shift from thought to thought to thought, your brain has to search different areas to gather up information so that we can gather the vision that you're trying to prepare in your mind, the sound that goes with it, any sensation that you gather in that is all scattered throughout the brain. So the brain collects all that information. So when you think of like a red balloon, you have to remember the shape of the balloon, the color of the balloon. Is it in a, all that gets imagined, and your brain has to gather all that information together. So the brain has to shift from thought to thought to thought to thought in order to gather all that information. So theta is important, but too much theta in the front of the brain, that's our ADD. I mean, ADD, ADHD, that's moving around all different speeds too fast, too often. So you got to shift gears, but you got to do it in a controlled fashion, right? So that's theta. So delta and theta. Then we have alpha. Alpha is the midpoint in the brain. The brain wants to be at this 10 hertz frequency, which is we call it the homeostatic midpoint between engaged and disengaged. So that's like you're engaged and active in doing something versus you're dead asleep. Right in the middle is alpha, and alpha, we call it an idling frequency. So the brain, in between shifting gears, has to idle to kind of shift in and out to prepare for what's coming next. So that's alpha. Alpha is kind of like our neutral gear in a car, just standing at the top of a hill, not rolling forward, not rolling backward, just perfectly balanced. So that's alpha. The last one, beta, is probably the frequency that most people associate with being focused, being on task, being organized. really our highest executive functioning brainwave frequency is that in that frontal lobe again, that beta frequency has to be very balanced. If it's not, if there's too much of it, then we're anxious, we're stressed out, we're over processing, we're not able to engage because we're so distracted. I tell people it's like being plugged into a wall socket all the time. Not enough beta, then you're just not engaged. You're not able to focus and concentrate because there's not enough power to run the different, I guess, software programs I have to run in the brain to pay attention, to
Right.
focus, concentrate, be on task. So those are the main brainwave frequencies, and that's the delta, theta, alpha, and beta.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said there's a book, isn't it? Like Symphony of the
Yeah, yeah,
Brain or
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
So that book.
I obviously being, a little ADD, ADHD, I have like 6 books that I'm reading right now. And so after I like finish flipping me through all the books that I'm reading right now, I have it on my to reads book, but I really want to learn a lot more about
Yeah,
this. So,
I jokingly tell people that when people say, "Hey, what are you reading? Like, what books are you reading?" I'm like, "I read so many books in college. I'm done reading." Like, I like podcasts, which is why I love this format. Love podcasts,
yeah.
and I have like 7 shows on my Netflix, 5 on my Amazon, on my Prime, and so I mean, I'm all over the place too. But I have to have that variety, right? And that's what keeps us entertained. Is one thing of too much. Too much of one thing is just it's overwhelming, right? So the book that you're talking about is a book called The Symphony in the Brain. It was written by a gentleman named Jim Robbins. Jim wrote that book back when I first started, even 27 years ago. That book was out, and it's an amazing book because it gives you the perspective of what brain mapping and neurofeedback is from a journalistic perspective, not a scientific one. So it's a very easy read for anybody who's interested in learning about neurofeedback and brain mapping. For those people that are interested more in like getting into the details, there's a great online resource, and it's the isnr.org or .com. I forget which one it is, but that's the International Society for Neuronal Regulation. They're kind of like the housing of all the literature and all the scholarly articles that are written on neurofeedback and brain mapping. That's housed at the University of Utah School of Medicine. So it's a really great resource for people that are looking for anything on ADD, anxiety, depression, fibromyalgia, chronic pain, epilepsy, peak performance. I mean, there's endless amounts of research in there on neurofeedback that's been compiled since the 1970s when this was around. This started in the 1960s, but I mean, you can imagine now where it's gone to. And then just in this short amount of time, I've seen it drastically change, and it's just gotten better. So, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing from that perspective.
So, like the brain mapping itself kind of gives you a baseline of where your brain is. Like anyone, no matter what their age, if they feel like there's some kind of dysregulation of how they're processing things, or anxiety, or they want to perform better, or otherwise, there isn't a reason not to have a brain map and kind of see where your brain
Yeah,
is.
no.
And then that's almost like kind of getting like blood work,
Mhm.
so to speak. And then from there, there's neurofeedback that you can do based on the data that you collect from the brain mapping. The brain mapping gives you all the information, and then someone who is a professional like you can then decide what to do with it depending on the client's overall goals. Am I synthesizing that properly?
Perfectly. I mean, that was spot on. So yeah. So the brain map is really our baseline. So it gives us a tool to look at which parts of the brain are contributing to the problem. So with executives, we like to look at work performances. There's so many different metrics for work performance, right? There's productivity, there's attention, there's how to recover from failures, how to recover from mistakes, your ability and threshold to tolerate stress in a work environment. But one thing that we focus on a lot with our executives, and it's interesting because you don't really think about it, when you first set out to help executives, but really what you're doing is you're helping the human being, right? Because that human being is also a mother or a father, a parent, a community member, people that are involved. And if you spend all of your energy and you burn the count at both ends at work, when you come home, what do you have left over? And how does that translate to home life, right? So working with
Right.
executives from that perspective really gives us the ability to unlock and look at, is it cognitive function? Is it emotional functioning? Because the brain integrates our functions from the perspective of what it receives from the outside environment and how the brain decodes it. So if you are perceiving information coming in as offensive or difficult, or just your overall perspective is like, people are talking down to me or people are not respecting me, what is the perception behind that? And that perception is based off of how the brain waves are being dissected and then interpreted by the individual, right? So for an executive, if they have too much of this frequency that's idling, or they're not able to focus so much, they might miss on verbal cues that tell them, hey, this person their pitch has changed, their tone has changed, the conversation has shifted dramatically, and I don't pick up on those verbal cues because my brain is not processing that information correctly. I'm going to miss a really big opportunity to either correct the ship and move in the right direction, or as a salesperson, I'm going to lose a sale because I wasn't really listening to my client or the person I'm trying to help. So when you get the brain map done, it unlocks and looks at all these different networks in the brain that integrate and problem solve. They process, they filter out unimportant information, and all that gets sent into the executive networks to analyze and process it, so that way it can be used for purposeful things like, staying calm, staying relaxed, staying focused. Because we know that if we don't stay calm, relaxed, and focused, then that reptilian brain kicks up and that anger kicks up, and nobody makes good decisions when we're angry because a little part of the brain called the amygdala takes over, and now we're in that fight or flight state. So how often are you at work not able to tolerate stress to the point where you're able to keep that fight or flight system? We call it the sympathetic versus parasympathetic mode. How do we keep that in a more non-sympathetic state or a parasympathetic state where we're calm, relaxed, and focused under stress? So once we examine that, we can put sensors on those individual areas that we find on the brain map report and then do the neurofeedback. And so neurofeedback is simply brainwave biofeedback. The reason that this works so well, Amy, is because this is the brain's language. The brain understands what we're asking it to do when it's presented a mirror image of itself on a computer screen through a brain-computer interface where we connect a laptop computer through an amplifier that listens to brain waves coming from little sensors, and we visually portray that information back to the individual through different tasks. So in our process, what we use videos and movies. So you sit in front of a computer monitor and you're watching a movie. When your brain is calm, focused, relaxed, in focus, and just producing really good balanced brainwave frequencies, then the screen brightens and you can watch the movie. Now, if your brain gets distracted, drifts off, gets anxious or tense, you wander and think about other stuff, the screen gets dark. And what that causes, it causes the brain to eventually learn how to control the brightness on the screen by producing only the calm, focused brain waves, and the brain gets rewarded for that and says, I want more. I want to see that video screen come to life more, and I want to see brighter screen. So, hey, if I produce the right brainwave patterns, I get rewarded. Sure, I can do that. Now, if I'm doing the wrong frequencies and I get punished for that, the brain goes through something we call operant conditioning. So operant conditioning is simply, when you're driving in a car and you don't buckle your seatbelt, the car will ding, ding, ding at you until you buckle your seatbelt, right? So what you do is, if I get in the car and I buckle my seatbelt before I even turn the ignition on or push the button, then I'm not going to hear that annoying sound. So you've been operantly conditioned to avoid that dinging sound by producing a behavior. Same thing with neurofeedback. If the brain's given feedback that if it produces the right patterns, it gets rewarded with the bright screen, it's going to try to produce those patterns more and more and more. The brain learns a new behavior, and then we see a permanent shift and change. So this isn't, it's not mind control, right? The brain's literally being taught a new way to focus, to be calm, and to be relaxed by rewarding it for producing the correct patterns.
I'd be so curious to see inside my brain. I can't tell you how many times, like, for instance, I go to Bible study, right? And I will literally be reading the Bible in front of like everybody in the room, and I'm thinking about something totally different while I'm reading. And I'm like, how is my brain like doing this? I'm like, shut up, brain. You're reading in front of everybody, and like you're reading this and thinking about this totally different thing, like my golf shot or, some deal at the same time. Yeah. At the same time.
That just goes to speak. And one of the neatest facts that I've ever been presented with is that the brain at any one moment in time is processing over 400 to 500 billion bits of information every 1 second. So if you can imagine what that would be like if we didn't have Delta putting the brakes on, we'd all just be, all over the place. So think about that if your brain is processing 400 billion bits of information, what's keeping that information from all making it to the foreground of attention? And the brain uses these networks, and the neatest thing about it is that it's layered, right? So at the core, we know, and this is real. This is one of the newer things in neuroscience that's come out in the last 10 to 15 years. But there's a system that we now call the DMN, the default mode network. These are seven different hubs, roughly seven different hubs that are kind of like, think of it as like your major airports. And you have regional airports and major airports, right? So these
Yeah.
seven different hubs are collecting information from different lobes in the brain, and then all that information travels through this network called the salience network. And why is that important? That salience network filters out information that is not salient or important to us at the moment. So that filtration process is key because whatever gets through that salience network, whatever the bouncers let in, gets into the club. And the club is club executive, right? That's our executive control area. So looking at the brain through that salience network, whatever passes through there makes it.
My bouncers are not very strict.
They're letting everybody in. It's a party in there. So yeah. So if the filtration system isn't weeding things out, then everything gets into the executive networks, and information overload. So too much at one time, it's hard to focus in. Now, some people like yourself have the gift of being able to multitask, and I will tell you another fun fact: women are better at multitasking than men are, and there's actually a reason for that. There's actually a membrane in the brain called the corpus callosum. It connects both hemispheres in the brain, and it has been shown that women have a thicker corpus callosum that unites the left and right hemispheres. So just naturally, women are better at multitasking. So it's not your hubby's fault if you can't pay attention and chew gum at the same time. It's really just that those brain connections are much tighter with female brains, and we see that through a lot of the studies that have been done to show that. Yeah. So neat little fun fact there about.
Well, they probably have to though, like for this health and safety of, I'm sure even back and I'm not trying to make this out to be like a patriarchal society, but back and I don't know, like 10,000 years ago or however many years ago, who was going out and getting the food
Right.
and stuff
Yeah,
like
right.
that, and like the women have to keep the kids safe or whatever. However, we evolved. There's a reason for it. So, no, it's funny. I always joke with my other mom friends. Is like I don't understand. Like I told him three things, he only done one, and then he forgot the other two. Versus like I know the seven things I need to do, like in an order, and like how I'm going to execute it. And yeah, so
Yeah, there's a whole field of study and science behind how the brains of men and women operate and how they're different, because there are structural things that are different, and we know that. But for the most part, a brain is a brain. It's designed really to filter out, take in information, analyze and process it, and then execute. And all that is really determined by those brain waves, and how those brain waves are functioning is important. That's why, to your point earlier, everyone could benefit from getting a brain map done for a baseline purposes,
mhm,
really. I mean,
right.
I never want this scenario to ever happen again, but we had a client one time, they had a brain map done, and then I get a phone call probably about 5 months later after we were done with the neurofeedback, and they were asking for records of the brain map report because they wanted to see them again, and it was because the child that had gotten the neurofeedback done had gotten knocked out playing football, had a concussion, and they didn't have
Oh, no.
any previous MRI or CT scans to show anything. But we had this brain map that showed us what his brain looked like at the end of neurofeedback and how the brain was optimal. And so we knew that if we have this baseline, a follow up of improvement from the second brain map, we could take those
Mhm.
two brain maps and compare it to the third one after the concussion and see what changed. And we were able to see that there was a significant increase in that delta frequency that we talk about so much, because injuries to the brain are pretty synonymous, and the literature shows us that if you have like excessive amounts of delta in one specific area, like in a focal area, we call it, that can be from a
Mhm.
sustained head injury, a concussion, even a fender bender could cause that. So ultimately, having those baseline tests are fantastic for yourself, for your kids, and everybody, just to kind of see what the brain looks like. It's not like a DNA 23andMe type thing where you can see, because the brain does change and evolve developmentally. But because of that, we really started to encourage a lot of families and parents to get incremental brain maps just to check in, like you said, like lab work. Come in every two to
Yeah.
3 years and get a brain map done and look at the evolution of your brain. And if there's something in the middle or in between, we can adjust, and we do some neurofeedback to help correct it.
Well, I was even thinking too, not even for that reason too, but like, what if somebody is like like me where, they're getting by, they're pretty darn successful, but but what would, in getting the neurofeedback, have you seen someone then be able to better optimize and perhaps, see better success from doing that?
Because and that's another great question too, because people say, well, I mean, I'm successful, I'm focused, and I'm on top of it, but why would I need a brain map for, right? Well, first and foremost, God forbid you ever get a bump to the head, and we have to try to see what your brain looked like before that happened. But secondly, unless you're in that top 2 percentile in the database system of perfect brains that we get from, people that are Mensa, that are, really high scoring, cognitive assessments, cognitive batteries, WISC, WACE, MMPI, all these different psychological test batteries that we include into the database system at different developmental stages, everyone could benefit from it, because we're not looking at just our visual processing. We're looking at our auditory processing. We're looking at our tone sequencing. We're looking at our memory function. So memory itself, if your memory function is good in one area but weak in another, we look at declarative, procedural, sequential, episodic, digit span, short-term, long-term working memory. We look at all those things. So knowing that, and also how to formulate sentences and express yourself, how to, dissect information that's being given to you through the auditory networks, and then also the attentional networks. Everyone can benefit from attention and improved attention. Even if your attention is top-notch, aging takes place. So this isn't just for the young that are needing help with ADD. It's for adults who have had really long stints of being on it, focused, attentive, but then age kicks in and you start to see a little bit of a decline cognitively. We can look at a brain map and say, because we know what an optimal brain looks like at this age, how are you compared to that individual or that group of individuals that are high performers? And if we know that there's little tweaks that we can do, then anyone can benefit. So that leads into, understanding not just the brain, but we touched on it just a little while ago, but the gut health too, which we can talk about at a
yeah, we have time. Yeah.
So that.
So talk about the relationship between the gut and the brain, and how does that kind of work together?
That's really the newest area that people are really getting into, is that gut-brain connection. We've known that it existed, but we didn't really understand it as much as we do now. But even relates to different, like your gut microbiome, and how that gut microbiome is using bacteria to create things like neurotransmitters or neuromodulators that are important for key relationship and key signaling in the brain. The gut is involved in that. Just a fact that always blows my mind is that your serotonin levels, that serotonin, we know that as your feel good, your behavioral, like your integrated, your social, networking, all that happens if your serotonin levels are good. It's what a whole industry of antidepressants is built on, those SSRIs, right? Those are serotonin secondary reuptake inhibitors. So imagine if all that serotonin was in your brain all the time, and you assume that that's where it's made. But the reality is that 90% of that serotonin is made in the gut. So if your gut has inflammation, if you have any type of leaky gut, dysbiosis, inflammation from food sensitivities or allergies, or even, you're ingesting things that are not creating or harmonizing that gut microbiome, it's affecting your brain. So what we've decided to do, and this is where my path has kind of led me down from the brain into the gut, was about 15 years ago, I became very interested in the gut, started asking a lot of questions of my colleagues, who I found out really they're not neuroendocrinologists and they're not dietitians, so they didn't really know, how to answer some of my questions. So I went out and got a neuroendocrine certification so I could order labs and look at neurotransmitter levels. We look at organic acid testing to see what type of potential bacteria or fungus or yeast could be in the way that are blocking the absorption of key nutrients to make neurotransmitters. And then we started getting into the path of DNA methylation, which is a really hot topic right now, because that DNA methylation is so critical to our ability to take raw foods, kind of think of it as like gasoline and oil, right? You got to take oil, convert it into the usable form of gasoline. There's a process, think of it as like a chemical process that goes from becoming oil to gasoline. Same thing with food. Your food is absorbed or taken in through the body, and then it has to go through a process to convert it into its usable form, which we call that methylation. Some people, the big hot topic is MTHFR, the methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase gene, right? That's a big one, because We know now.
The motherfucker gene. I could say
Yeah,
it.
no, the MTHFR gene, right? It's funny because that,
I have
yeah.
it.
Well,
So,
the reason that gene's so important is because that's involved with
yeah.
our ability to take folate, which is one of the most abundant nutrients in our diet, and convert it into methylfolate, which is one of the most utilized and really significant key nutrients in our body. When you have that genetic mutation, whether it's a single or a double expression that you got from mom and dad or both mom and dad, then your ability to convert folate and also folic acid, which is a man-made nutrient, it's not found in
Right.
nature.
Was that like
Head on,
1993
yeah,
or when did that
1993.
start?
Yep. I heard that it was from our friends at Monsanto that brought it to the market because there was a big conversation about folic acid and how important it is into neurotube formation. I've heard opposing arguments that has nothing to do with that, but we knew that it was important as a nutrient. What we didn't know is that over 40% of the human population, men and women, do have this genetic mutation and can't convert it. So here's the problem.
And what are some of the signs that you need to look into? I mean, one, you should probably just know no matter what, but like what would be something like definitely be a clue that you have that gene? Is it like brain fogginess, like tiredness? What do you see?
It's a whole cascade, it's a laundry list of symptoms. Yeah, because that methylation, especially the folic acid or the methylfolate, it's called a methyl donor. So what it does is it donates to many different chemical chain reactions in the body. But to answer your question, somebody who has this genetic mutation, if they were to consume, let's say, folic acid, it would be like it'd be like crack. It literally would just make you over revved. It overexcites the neurons in the brain, and if you can't convert it, you have too much of it in you. Then you just are. There's a guy, a famous podcaster, that talks about it. He says it's like is it a wrestling match every morning to get your kids into the car? Well, you consume cereal in the morning, you consume bread, you consume grains, things that have this fortified or enriched nutrient folic acid in it, then and you can't convert it, and now you're just flooding the brain and the neurons and the whole brain circuitry to this overly excitation process. That is a telltale sign. Literally to the point, I'll share like a really fast story because it's so important to this conversation. I had a family, we did a brain map on their child. They had gone to the Amen clinics and had found that they had this, they call it the Ring of Fire ADD, which is like, it's basically like all the ADD profiles. You've got anxiety, you've got anger, you've got irritability, you've got inattentive, you got, like.
How do you figure that out again? You have to do a brain map and something
So
else?
yeah, so one way to do it is you can get something called it's a PET scan, but PET scan, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm impartial to PET scans because we can get a lot of information from the brain map, and then we don't have to inject it
Right.
with radioactive isotopes. So that's just my preference. But getting
Yeah.
that diagnosis of ADHD and then having that diagnosis put on you, there was one thing that was not looked at, and that was that the DNA. And so what happened was is we said, okay, well, you got that diagnosis, we got a brain map. Let's look at the DNA. We looked at the DNA, and sure enough, MTHFR double expression. So it was a double allele expression of that mutation. And I came back, did the reporting with the family, and I said, would it be possible for me to come to your home? Because I was, I had been to their house for the brain map and wanted to go over some results. So I personally went over to their home,
Mhm.
and I said, could I rummage through your pantry? I'm not hungry, but I want to see what's in there. And sure enough, there was all the snacks that he was eating, all of the, the grains, the pastas, the rice, the cereal, everything was all conventional, over like off the shelf at Publix or wherever they're getting it. And I asked him, I said, would you be open to switching him over to 100% organic from the grain starch perspective? Can we get the cereals, the bread, the pasta, the wheat, anything that he can have or wants to have, as
Yeah.
long as it's organic? Now,
It needs to be like non-GMO, semolina pasta, like all that. Get rid of the anything enriched, anything folic
yeah, and
acid.
and
Yeah.
so that was the goal, right? The goal was let's try that, right? So immediately they did it, and what they started off with was just not giving him any of it for 2-3 days, right? A week later, when I had their follow up because we were going over some other information, they said, you know what, ADD's gone. We haven't even done the neurofeedback and the ADD is gone. I'm like, what do you mean? And they said, he is calmer. He is more focused. We give him tasks to do and he completes them. And all we did was just got rid of all this conventional food that's, got the enriched or fortified on the back of the label. And could it be that simple? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes, it could be that simple. Now, he did do the neurofeedback, and he got significant increases in focus and attention, and learned new things from that as well. But just knowing that once in a lifetime DNA test can have such significant impact, on your overall wellness, you can customize your nutrition based off of that DNA report, which is why I think it's such a valuable tool for us to know and understand what's going on with the gut, know and understand what's going on with the gut microbiome, and then also understand how that DNA is affecting our ability to even absorb these nutrients at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, my whole 20s, like I did not eat very well and did not feel fully optimized. But I would say about 10 years ago, probably like 2015 or so, I started really reading like the Michael Pollan books and Omnivore's Dilemma and watching a ton of documentaries. I told you too, I went through and figured out all my dirty genes and then definitely like eradicating like folic acid from our household, as best like we can. Obviously we can't 100% control things like what, some stuff's going to steep in, but I think to the majority of it, I think it's really beneficial for us. And I think there's starting to become a lot more options that are like the non-GMO and those types of things. And you can get a lot of those too through meal delivery services and otherwise as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's become an issue because there's no question that, and we see it, with a lot of the new things with this new administration coming in with the focus on health, is that we want to get rid of things that, why are we the only country, that gets a pass with red food dyes in our diet, right? Our cereals, it was a scary thing. Social media is not where I get my information from, but it was interesting to see how much had seeped in to the mainstream that, you look at the ingredient list for some foods that are made here, the U.S. based companies that export, certain foods and cereals to other countries, and you look at their ingredient list, and it's like 5-6 ingredients, and then you look at the U.S. based version of that same exact product, and it's a list this long of different chemicals that I can even read to you because they're just, so long. They're just these chemical names. So there's a lot of questions that are being asked now about, our food supply. The recurrence or the onset of ADD, of autism spectrum disorders, all these different things that are popping up mysteriously along the same timeline that agriculture is starting to become more efficient, industrialized and efficient, right? Preservatives are a big thing. Food is expensive if it spoils. It's not profitable. So preservatives are a big thing that, had to take over. Now, that's been trouble since going back to the caveman days, right? We learned that you preserve certain things like, fish. My wife is from Russia. She used to tell me stories about her mom telling her about the olden days, and during the cold season, because we were listening to a podcast about probiotics, and they were talking about how there's things like kimchi, right? That you just basically just water, salt, and cabbage, and then it ferments, and then it's a great, prebiotic that has a bunch of really beneficial, bacteria and cultures that are super beneficial to the human diet. And she would talk about how, during the winter times, they would eat all the foods that they had preserved or that they had gone through the salting process. So fish, heavily salted, preserve it and be able to use it later on. Preserving food is not something new. It's the chemicals that are being introduced to preserve the foods that are newer, more scientific, more efficient, less expensive.
My family had a big farm, and they'd stopped having like cows and stuff. Well, actually, my cousin still has cows. She's an organic valley farmer in Vermont. But my great grandmother had a farm, and she canned tons of her food and preserved lots of her food. But I think, you just get to where, like, depending on where you grow up, I think it's just an awareness and researching it and, doing what's right for your family, But I think to the extent that, you if you're going to have folic acid, then I think you should make sure that it's not poison for you.
Yeah, I mean, and that 100%. That's why it's every single food on the planet is not compatible with every single organism on the planet, and we know that
Right.
because I take cats for example. Those things are like monkeys with claws, but I love them. We have three of them, and it amazes me that from a organistic perspective, as an organism, they are strictly on a protein meat diet, and they don't eat. You don't see cats foraging for fruits and vegetables in the woods, right? They live. They're set up to live just on a meat diet, but they get their minerals from organs, and different electrolyte balances come from
Hmm.
that. So everything is different, and so I say that only because there's an even deeper variety in the human biome as well too. That we look at cultures now where when we started to understand and look into like bacterial cultures in the gut, we thought, let's go ahead and take a big, large sample size of the American diet. And we found out that there was a very specific, gut microbiome for Americans and American diets. And we thought, well, people that have these bad bacterias, we're going to put them into the category of Americans that have bad gut microbiomes, right? Then they started studying the gut microbiomes of countries and people that live in non-agricultural, non civilized biology, and they have a significantly broader gut microbiome because they don't have
Mm.
the exposure to the preservatives or to the food dyes or to things that are not beneficial, in the human diet. So what we found out, excuse me, was that our gut microbiome in the diversity that we have in the United States has only a small amount of the actual really long, the people that live a long time have a significantly wider spectrum of gut microbiome diversity that is significantly impacting the human brain. So, to kind of reel everything back together, that gut brain connection, we can do a brain map, see where you're at. We can teach the brain new behaviors and patterns. But if you don't pair it with a good understanding of what your gut's doing and how that is functioning, what are the either, there's things like parasites and fungus that can block or create, dysbiosis, leaky gut, IBS. These are all things that are, you go to your doctor, you have a GI doctor that tells you, these are the things that you have. Let's go ahead and treat them with medication, with these other things. And, not saying medicine's bad because I think medicine has its place 100%.
Yeah.
But, there are things that you can do just with your diet to help correct it. Prebiotics, probiotics, doing cleanses, doing, things that are just healthy for the body are key
Hmm.
staples that we've gotten away from 100% because of convenience. And that's really the truth, is that we're a society of convenience here. And if it's not convenient at eye level at the grocery store, we got to bend down to go grab it, we got to reach to go grab it. We might not be as inclined to go grab it, but that's why it's nice to have organizations that are looking at, you look at Chamberlain's, Sprouts, Whole Foods.
I love sprouts.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're
yeah, so
fantastic. I
good.
mean, if they didn't have one here where I live in Oviedo, I'd go nuts because it's such a great place to just walk in, and you just feel healthy walking in there. Maybe it's in my head.
Oh
You
yeah.
just feel like you're
Oh
walking
no,
with
it's so
something
good.
good for your
Yeah.
body. So
Well, I think it's kind of like these healthy habits. It's like practicing and learning the piano, or it's like playing like a sport. And the more that you get used to doing these things, it's been an incremental journey for me. Like if you look back like 10 years ago, I think I was on medication for ulcerative colitis. I was on, medication for anxiety, and I had all these different things. But if you would work on it and you get these brain maps, you get these different, you get awareness, and you start taking paths. Like what takes more time, going to the doctor all the time and going to the pharmacy all the time to get prescriptions refilled? I mean, I love that I don't have to think at all of taking anything other than my supplements. So,
well, I want. I still,
and I'm not going to tell to everybody that you can 100% get off of these things, but for me personally, and at least my family, we found like a healthy path to go to, and it definitely gives me much more time to not have to deal with getting all these prescriptions and all these
yeah,
things.
and I tell people all the time, look, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not licensed to practice medicine. Um, what I do is I try to interact as little with medicine as possible. That's my goal. There are things that you absolutely 100% need medication for. Until it's figured out, until there's another way figured out, medicine has been fantastic. I mean, we're in the United States. I think we are the leading nation in the world that, if I'm going to get banged up on the highway or get into a car accident, I want to be in the United States where level 1 trauma centers are top notch, right? Now, when you look at chronic illness, we are bottom of the barrel, right? Because it's very much driven by, and I'm not a conspiracy theory person by any means, but I can add 1+1. And when I look at the profitability of drugs versus the supplement or nutraceutical markets that are out there, there's a direct competition there because it isn't an instantaneous feel. You can't start taking a supplement and feel the effects of a very powerful medication that is very convenient to take. You've got to do the work. You got to put the time in, and it really is a value shift that you have to go through. There's David Wolf, who's a big raw foodist guy. He says it's the same action. It's the same behavior to take, a junk food and go like this and put it in your mouth, or to take a vegetable and put it in your mouth. It's the same thing. It's the same behavior. It's the concept and the mindset of the satisfaction we get from filling our bodies with foods that taste good. But what else is in there? What else besides the taste is in there? And that's what parents, more than anybody else, and executives are some of the worst eaters. And, my athletes, they've got nutritionists, but how many executives have nutritionists on staff to help them with their performance? They don't. So looking at these tests to kind of evaluate your baselines and see where you're at is where we thrive, is really where we have the ability to really take a good look and then give people all the information that they can possibly have to correct these things, to be better at their jobs, to be better at home, to be better in their communities, to support, the communities that support them, if they have the energy to do it because they're eating the right foods and their brain's balanced because their neurotransmitter levels have been addressed and their brains have been mapped and they've done neurofeedback to help correct these things. These are the things that we excel in, and which is why, I really have made it my now life's mission to get this information out. So I thank you big time for giving me the opportunity to talk to your subscribers and to people that are interested in something like this. This is what we do now for a living. So it's been an interesting journey for us as well too.
Yeah, it's so interesting to learn about all these different things. But the good news is like, I think armed with this information, again, there are so many more tools at your disposal to then get the right fuel into your body or get what you need to, operate at the highest level. And so, really, I thought having you on the Performance Mindset show made a lot of sense because, again, if you have a growth mindset and you're wanting to grow, and again, you have one body, so you want to take as great care of it as you can, and it really does help if you are more optimized. And so I know you've seen it with those you work with, and whether athletes, executives, or otherwise. So this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, you got to look. You got to look, and people go, well, why not just take a bunch of supplements? Just take them all. And I'm like, do you really want to take all the supplements? Because there's a lot of supplements out there. So I tell people,
what is that guy on like Netflix or something that spends like $1 million a year? What is?
Oh God, I believe it. Supplements aren't cheap, so why not find out what your body needs versus just taking all the supplements, right? And that's really, I mean, I tell people, like, a takeaway for your viewers is that if you're not on a probiotic, a fish oil, a multivitamin, a multimineral, and vitamin D, start with those things. Just those are the essential basics. One of my favorite, and a mentor of mine for some time, Dr. Jeff Mueller, expert in IV therapies and just an amazing human being, told me, if you're going to give people any advice about supplements, start with those 5. And those things really are the kind of the foundational basis. And then you can start looking at details for what are you deficient in? What are you lacking? What are you missing? What can your body even absorb? And then go from there. And if you get that right, you may at the very most have to take 2 or 3 supplements to kind of get everything nowadays it's not just one
Yeah.
supplement. There's a product out there that has 5 key ingredients to help calm the nervous system down. So why not figure out which ones you need to take and then bundle everything versus just having 90 bottles of supplements out on your counter and trying to do that every week and organize that. I've tried it. It's not fun to, you know.
No, I mean, yeah, I think, and again, like, my book is like from perfect. I've realized too that, at least I'm doing 80 to 90% of what I'm supposed to be doing, and I get really good at that. And then maybe that becomes like a habit. I'm not going to worry about, the fact that if I ate cheese, it's at a kid's birthday party, every so often, and those kinds of things, or if I went out and had like a cheeseburger. But like, as long as like most of the time you're, feeling your body well, and you're really, being intentional about the things, you are going to make, progress.
Well,
So,
think
yeah.
of it this way. It's kind of like we have this mindset where cigarettes are terrible for you, but yet people smoke cigarettes, right? Because one cigarette's not going to kill you. Your body's resilient. Your body can deal with it. Your body can handle toxins. If you do the 90% work that you do, you have nothing to worry about if you have a cheat day or two, or you slip for like a week or so, or
Yeah.
life happens, and then you need that comfort food for like 3-4 days. Your body's resilient enough to get through that, and then you can get back to the healthy mindset, that got you.
Well, and also if you do a few days of that, you're going to feel like, I'm
You
not
will.
feeling
Yeah,
very
that's a
good.
great point
Yeah.
too. That once you start getting really healthy, people go, man, my body's weak now, man. I can't even eat a cheeseburger without feeling like crap. It's like, no, it's not. It's just your body's appropriately reacting now to what that bad food
Yeah.
is. It's supposed to do that. You just do it
Yeah.
so often, your body's kind of adjusted to it, and it's so toxic, that there's no room for feeling bad anymore because it's part of your. If that was true, everybody would smoke a cigarette and be like, "Oh, I feel terrible after that cigarette." People, they put so much stuff in those cigarettes to make you feel better after you have it that that it's
Yeah.
just anyway. So it is a balance, and you can either do that for 75, 80 healthy years, or you can be in your 50s and 60s on not 50 different supplements but 50 different medications, and then you're stuck dishing those out into pill dispensers every week anyway. So why not take the supplements now and just keep it to a minimum?
Yeah.
So anyways.
My goodness. Well, this has been good. So how do people best get a hold of you? Like, is there an inquiry page on your website or following you somewhere? What's the best way to get a hold of
So
you?
a few ways.
If people
So you can call us at 407-708-3200. And that's our phone line for our coordinator, which will pick up, and she will get back with you. I'm just going to triple check that because we just can you imagine?
Oh, I did a Facebook, I did an Instagram reel today, and then I said my phone number for my brokerage wrong. So don't worry about it.
That's too funny. Yeah. So, anyways,
Remember,
that you can also go to our website, which is Healix². It's spelled HEALIX, the number 2.com. And then we have a contact page, or just about anywhere on the page, there's a place for you to fill out the information to go ahead and just give us a call and contact us. And I'm trying to think of any other way. I mean, right now, those are really the best ways to get a hold of us. We also have our email address, which is simple. It's just hello, HELLO, at Healix, HEALIX2.com. And that phone number is 407-708-3200. And someone will, take your information. We'll set up a Zoom call. We don't typically charge for our consultations, which is fantastic because people really can get a chance to get me on a one-on-one call to really go over kind of what their needs are, what they're looking for, what they need. And then if I can't help, I've been doing this long enough to where I've got a great support of community doctors, physicians, providers, everything from integrative psychiatrists to functional health doctors, high-dose nutritional IVs facilities that are going to support us. We have pediatricians now that are experts in gut health that we're working with, and then other pediatricians that are just integrative, functional-minded that are not going to try to recommend every medication for your child. They'll use it if need be, but we're getting smarter about it, and there's more doctors now, especially here in Central Florida, that are surfacing that can do that. So, people can get a hold of us through any one of those methods, or they can. I mean, I won't give up my personal cell phone number. I used to do that, but it got a little crazy. But
No, once you start to work with them, maybe you get there. So yeah,
sure.
Awesome. Well, no, this has been really good. So I got a lot out of it, and I'll make sure too that my post-production crew gets with you to get any kind of spellings of any kind of like technical terms as well. So I'll loop you in via email after the show. So, well, I will go ahead. I want to thank everybody for listening to the Performance Mindset Show. If today's episode gave you something to think about, be sure to share it and subscribe about it. Don't forget to grab a copy of my book, From Perfect to Real. It's all about dropping perfection and thriving your way. Until we connect again, you can see us on beyondcommercial.com or amycalandrino.com. And so until next time we chat, stay grounded, stay growing, and keep showing up for you. This is Amy Calandrino signing off.